Okay, so now that we know how to complete the square, we're going to use completing the square to solve a quadratic equation. So a quadratic equation here means that we're going to have a squared in it, right? It's like some x squared or y squared or something like that, something squared. So here you can see that we have an x squared in here, okay? And one thing that we would do when we solve quadratic equations in the past is we would try and factor. So if I try to factor this here on the left-hand side, this x squared plus 8x minus 3, this here does not factor. So sometimes it won't factor, and sometimes it's just hard to figure out how to factor. You can't figure it out, and sometimes it will factor. Okay, so if it does not factor, here is an option for you to solve using completing the square. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write down the original equation. I'm just going to walk through these steps with you. We're going to write down the original equation, and then we're going to move this constant. So whatever this constant is right here, we're going to move it over to the other side. So on the left side, everything that you see here, this stuff all has x's in it. So all the stuff on this side should all have x's in it. All has x's. So one's an x squared, one has x's. Alright, and then what we're doing is we're finding that magic number that we found above. So we're looking for what is that special number that we can add so that it can make this beautiful x plus 4 quantity squared. So we're trying to write it in that form as one factor, one set of parentheses, squared. And we saw above that what we're going to do is we're going to look at the number with the x. So here we have 8x. And if we break up 8x, that's going to be a 4x and a 4x. And then we have our x squared still. So x squared plus 4x. And then what we did here is what we would add. What we're missing is we're missing the 4 squared. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 4 squared. And if I add it on one side, I have to add it on both. Alright, so then I factor into x plus 4 quantity squared. And then equals 3 plus 4 squared is 16, so that'd be equals 19. And then I know that in order to get rid of a square, I'm going to take the square root. So here I'm going to take the square root, so that cancels. And then I take the square root, and don't forget when you do the square root, you put plus or minus. And then I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides to get x all by itself here. So just doing minus 4, so minus 4 here, minus 4 here. Remember that you can't combine that minus 4 with the 19 because the 19 is under the square root. And so then you have these two answers. So notice, you can break them up. One answer is x equals negative 4 plus square root of 19. If you use a calculator, that's about 0.36. The second answer here is negative 4 minus the square root of 19, which is about negative 8.36. Okay, so you're going to get two answers for this one. Alright, let's try 2 examples. So let's solve by completing the square. Alright, so first I'm going to rewrite the problem, and look at the 9 is already moved over to the right hand side. So I have all the x stuff on one side already. So I'm just going to rewrite it, x squared plus 10x. I'm going to leave a space right here. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of space right here so I can figure out what's that magic number going to be, equals 9. And I'm going to have to put that same magic number on the other side, right? Alright, so now I need to find out what that magic number should be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 10 here, and this 10 could be broken down into a 5x and a 5x. And then again, I would have my x squared. And so what's missing from that, just like we did above, is we're missing 5 squared. So 5 squared is 25, so I'm going to add 25. Okay. Alright. And so this stuff here is kind of like side work. So this is like your thinking bubble. You don't need to write that down on your paper. Okay, but that's what you're thinking about. Alright, and since I added 25 to the left side, I have to add 25 on the right hand side. And then I'm going to continue to solve. So now I want to factor this. So I know that this will factor into an x plus 5 times an x plus 5, and that equals then 36. And x plus 5 times x plus 5, since it's the same, I write it as x plus 5 quantity squared equals 36. And then the next thing I will do is I will take the square root on both sides. So if I take the square root, it cancels, and I take the square root. Well, what's the square root of 36? Yeah, so what's the square root of 36? So you should have said plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus, 6. Okay, and so then when I have plus or minus 6, now I'm going to have to add 5 to both sides. Now, when I add 5 to both sides, subtract 5. So subtract 5, subtract 5. Well, I can combine the positive and negative 6 with the 5. So I'm going to break it up and do 2 separate though. So x equals negative 6 minus 5, or x equals the positive 6 minus 5. So I do it 2 separate because it does represent 2 separate answers. So x equals negative 11, or x equals 1. And there we have our 2 answers. So in this case, we were able to combine them, and so we want to combine them and actually calculate and simplify as much as possible. All right, let's look at letter B. So first we have to move this. This does not have x's in it, so we want to move it over to the other side. All right, so I have x squared minus 2x, and I'm going to leave my space, equals 24. So I've left my space here to figure out what's that magic number. What's that magic number? So think about what is that magic number we're going to put in there. And what you should be thinking, or if you need to write it down, you absolutely can, is we already have the x squared. So we're thinking we already have this x squared, and then this negative 2x breaks up into 2, so negative 1x, negative 1x. And then if I take this negative 1 that I have there, and I square it, negative 1 squared is just 1, so I should be adding 1. Okay, so hopefully you came up with you should be adding 1. So on the left and on the right. And so I add 1. Okay. So then I'm going to factor. So when I factor this, this can become an x minus 1 and an x minus 1 equals 25. Then I write it, since it's the same as x minus 1 quantity squared, equals 25. Again, to just get rid of the square, we take the square root, and so now I have x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 25 is 5. So now I'm going to add 1. So again, I'm going to split it into 2 equations. So I have x is equal to 5 plus 1, or x is equal to negative 5 plus 1. And I do want you guys to write out the 2 separate equations until you get really used to this. So now I get x equals 6, or x equals negative 4. Alright, and that is the end of the completing the square notes for today. So bring these, we're going to review this again tomorrow at our meeting. So bring these to the meeting, and also bring the next page of notes down here, which is this lesson 10.1 lines and segments that intersect circles, as well as your VTP. Thank you, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.